Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. And just thanks for your time for coming together to kind of put a little bit of a bow on this project that Deb and I, and I know so many other people, it's a hot topic in regards to our workforce. I know Carolyn's working on it and Christina on a daily basis, 24/7, 365, not just during the pandemic, but it's a constant. And of course, there's just been some higher focus right on it over the last couple of years because of the changes with the pandemic and the Great Resignation and whatnot. But we, we sent, everybody should have received a copy of the report in advance, and maybe just get a little conversation happening as maybe a couple comments that anybody gleaned from the report. If there was maybe anything new or reinforced information that's already out there. Anybody?
Definitely reinforced some of my knowledge about some of the issues with housing and how it's all sort of intertwined and like labor shortages of local businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Christina, Carolyn, anything? I know you have so many of these types of reports that come across your desk, I'm sure.
You know, I think just like Sarah was talking about, everything is so intertwined, but I think what businesses can do is some of that job quality things that were touched upon that can become kind of the tipping point between, for an employee, do I go this way or do I go that way with a good employer? And those are things all under our control or the business control. So I thought that was good to point those out.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, just kind of dovetailing on that. Every workforce conversation I've been in for the longest time really gets sidetracked when we bring in these issues of, housing and childcare. They're very, very important issues. I do not want to dismiss those, but it seems like the emphasis on workforce kind of goes, well, if we can't solve housing and we can't solve childcare, well, then we can't move forward with these other things. And so, that's something that's really been occurring to me, is that these workforce conversations aren't moving forward because people are looking at those as like insurmountable barriers. And until we fix those, we can't do the rest. And I think that, if we're going to talk about workforce, we need to plow forward in dealing with, workforce and the skills development that they need and preparing them for the jobs of tomorrow, and work in other ways on housing and childcare and supports there, where our role, I think, with workforce, can be employer supports for childcare or housing. But just trying to tackle those big issues is limiting, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those thoughts.
I agree, Christina, because there are groups that are working on those issues, namely in this area, but I think people think that those barriers are so, like you said, insurmountable that we can't do anything else. It's like people get numb to it, but I believe, like you, that we can work on these other things to help support the people that actually are in the workforce right now that need those skills and are wanting to improve, and they're wanting that professional development. I agree with you.
So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and share. Can everybody see the screen? That'll just take us through a few of the slides. And again, this is information that was in the report, but I just wanted to highlight a few things and create a discussion. And since we have a small group, we'll just stay together. We don't have to do breakouts to, again, get some of your feedback. So, of course, I think, again, what we learned through the multitude of ways we were getting, call it, information through one-on-one conversations, through a survey. I even did some podcasts that dug deep into this topic. Worked with knowing what COVENTURE is doing when it comes to a trade school in Colorado BOCES, and kind of took some of their information and been at some of their meetings and kind of, try to put some of these common themes right together into this report and see what's going on. So it really boils down to, the upskilling, the reskilling. I feel the onboarding and the reboarding are kind of those 4 categories to me that really stand out to support the elements of our workforce, to create a vital workforce. So how do we nurture all those 4 elements, both for the employee and the employer? So of course, the findings, what was really interesting, I think, is that there was minimal resistance from organizations saying, I can't, money never came up, or it wasn't that I wouldn't let my employees go get additional support and training or development opportunities. And there's definitely a need of some of these like foundational skills, I think, was another big element of some of the findings and comments that came out. If it's just customer service, Erin Parr at the Gantt is with us, and resiliency type of skills, or if it's even some computer technology elements, or writing a business email that gets good response, different things like that came to mind. And then of course, this is the slide that I think, and of course in the page in your report that talked about the needs and the resources. And again, it's like we need office skills, financial literacy, mental health and emotional intelligence training. Again, you can probably all see the list here. I'm not gonna read it word for word and again in the report, but this to me is, one of the things is after we gather the data, it's like, what are we going to do, right? What do we do with this information? And I'll come back to this slide for more discussion. But of course, we understood the resources and barriers, of course, is like finding the qualified instructors, and they're out there, right? They're out there. It's just like tying them maybe to an institution to be able to deliver the content, right? Or the training that we're looking in some cases, or, if they're short staffed, the idea is maybe they don't have time to be thinking of where to find trainings and different, it's like, can't even think straight right now. We probably all had those moments. Inflation is obviously affecting all of us. Bandwidth, so again, we understand some of these barriers, and I think there's, it's always good to keep those in mind, of course, when you're looking to provide an offering, what might get in the way, and then what are those things that might be able to break down those barriers. So, excuse me, the short-term priorities was to look at creating that like local listing potentially of where people can find these training opportunities. And of course, that's going to take collaboration. Like, sure, we can build out a web page somewhere, right? Let's just say that exists, but it's a matter of getting information to go on it. And it's also dispersing the information. And I think that's where like partnerships are helping promote that, even from the level of people that were involved in these conversations could support that being highly used, right? And being a resource for the community. And then the other thing was, I think, again, a really common topic that usually is top of the list is more communication training, right? Those interpersonal skills that we heard so much about. And the thought was maybe, try a piloting type of a program and see how that works. And then of course, finding, again, like keeping the momentum going on making sure that those staying relevant to what topics are needed for training. Continuing the collaborative efforts amongst the organizations, I think, is something to, keep that thread moving so that we see progress happening. And then, of course, try to continue to remove financial barriers, whatever that is. And in some cases, we can find scholarships or grant opportunities, or employers can pay and whatnot. So hence, it kind of goes down to, in some cases, it's either secured funding that could come through grants or other types of resources, or it's people are paying, right, for programming. I think keeping the stakeholders together to make sure there's momentum, and then watch what that progress looks like and figuring out those measurements, which I talked to, like what would that look like, and I put some ideas into that. But again, here is where, and Deb, chime in here at any point, it's kind of like, beyond communication skills, like I would love to hear real as specific as possible. What are those immediate training or development opportunities that we see in our communities that we could potentially deliver? Christina?
Okay, I had just a strange thought while you were talking. Think about onboarding, because most smaller employers are really challenged by onboarding. Really challenged. And part of that goes back into kind of their business structure, whether or not they've got an employee manual and some of those other things. But I'm wondering if there would be a need for almost an onboarding series, that happen once a month, or, the businesses who just hired new employees kind of have a training provider available where they could say, the third week of this month, you're going to spend time in these classes, and, what those include, that could be the communication, professionalism, customer service, some of those soft skills that most employers need, but that they don't know how to train to, yet they're frustrated that their workforce doesn't have them. And
I think that's a really good idea, Christina. And I don't believe it's, and Anne Marie can attest to this, I don't believe it's just small organizations that have an issue with onboarding. I mean, CMC, in fact, the administrative assistant I work with, Anne Marie knows Amy, we're meeting tomorrow because we're getting ready to hire a bunch of new instructors. And it's like, we need to streamline our onboarding process a little bit more and make it easier for these new employees and provide them with some tools and some information on what to expect during the onboarding process. So it's not just, I think it's an inherent problem with everybody.
And you know what, Deb, that was a really good point. Carolyn can attest. I think she and I waited between 4 and 6 months just to have a computer after we got hired with the state, which is not a small employer.
We have the same issues.
Well, and to your point, since we have so many small businesses and they hire maybe the onesies and twosies, and they're sitting there going, okay, I don't have time to onboard these people. So I'm going to wait until I have enough so that it will be cost effective for me to do this. And so some people are waiting 6 months, or they never get it, any type of onboarding or background. And so if there's kind of a general, like Chris, you were talking about, once a month, okay, everybody, here's a 2-day package where you learn customer service, you learn how to deal with difficult people, and you learn communication skills, interpersonal as well as, other types of communication. And then it's kind of an ongoing rolling training for the little folk. And it's like, cost effective. I mean, it's not cost effective, but it's manageable from a budget perspective for those folks. And I think that'll solve the the onesies and twosies that got hired, but also really focus on programs for our small businesses, because that's really what we serve. And they don't have the resources to do something like this, and they fall behind.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We kind of used to do a little bit. I just kind of think about it when we did business and breakfast. So at the library, where we just hit hot topics, and there were so many small businesses that attended that because they just wanted help. And then a lot of the things, what I see, I do continuing ed for CMC, and what I see are people are getting stretched so much because they are short-staffed, and so those people are being asked to do even more. And so there's a lot of these people in these offices that are tasked with doing marketing. I mean, it's laughable. I mean, any of you that know marketing, it's crazy that they're asking these people to do it. Like, oh, just post a couple things, And so these poor people in these offices are just stressed out of their minds, even to create a flyer. I mean, these are skills that they didn't have. And so in my mind, I keep thinking, having stuff like that. How do you create a flyer? How do you, social media, little things that these businesses can do that can help them out and teach some of that. Kind of jumping back, I really do think that the communication piece is really important, because from what I hear, I loved somewhere in the report, Andrea, I saw people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses.
Yep.
So true. And right now, I mean, it's just so pivotal to hear so many people, especially like my kids, you know, these young kids that they're like, forget it, I'm out of here. You know, and it's just that manager learning how to communicate to that worker and learning how to, you know, move them up, not just constantly be on them. I think that is such an important skill that we need to teach. And I know Dave Levine, he teaches for me, and we talked about this, creating a communication class, but I think it's really important. And I think it's important for, number one, that kid to realize, you know, how do you communicate with the boss? It's not one of your friends that you can just, you know, the way they talk to each other. It's a whole nother world. So I think that's really important. Those little things that we can do right now in the short term that we can help these businesses out. That's kind of I actually thought too, sorry, I get on a roll. Like CMC, I kind of think too that we could partner with some of these businesses and bring them in. So we can, you know, go to Holy Cross or whatever, bring them in, do some of this training on site, you know, EQ, and some of that stuff that we can really start hitting the different businesses and make it affordable. I just think that's a start.
I am a very huge fan right now of the need for management and supervisory training. And more so, you know, I don't feel like we include that in our business courses or our entrepreneur courses, this aspect of human resources. You know, we look at the laws, we look at, you know, some measurement tools, but really how to manage people in a way that meets their needs as well as the companies, you know, trying to balance those is something I would, you know, to Carolyn's point about, you know, really pushing for not just more jobs or training people, but quality jobs. That supervisory piece, I think, is super critical.
Well, and to your point, Chris, too, is that because we have this labor shortage, and Anne Marie, what you were talking about is people are getting hired to do all kinds of things. So, oh, by the way, your manager on duty. You've been with us for 6 months, your manager on duty. And so, wait a second, you know, here you put this person in an untenable position, and that's when they say, see ya, I'm not getting paid to manage anyone. I don't even know how. So as we have this labor shortage, people are going to move up, and we need to make sure that those people have those skills to do a good job and be comfortable to do that job. So I'd throw supervisory skills in addition to the communication skills, how to manage those people, because I think that middle layer or the next layer up from entry level is really critical. And not way back when, probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 years ago, there was a group or a bunch of seminars called Skillsoft. Anyone remember those? You know, and so they would come and say, great, you know, for $65, we'll train a group of people on time management or communication skills, you know, and it wasn't anybody local. They just kind of came in. So it's almost that type of suite of things that we can hit, and then have the resources to support those folks who have gone through the training and have some follow-up or feedback.
Those are all great ideas. So if this is what I was hearing, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're in need of some ethical leadership type of modules, some communication skills type of modules, not only for, you know, entry-level supervisors, mid-level supervisors, and maybe even upper-level supervisors, in addition to employee communication skills and employee basic skills for the workplace, like email etiquette, that type of thing. Did I capture that kind of?
Yep. And I would add, I know you were talking communication skills, but I really want to point out the conflict resolution and dealing with difficult people just as a call out, because in this age, I think we need to equip people with those types of tools to do their jobs.
Because those situations are more frequent. I don't know if folks are just tapped out from the pandemic, but I feel as though we are encountering more difficult conversations and situations in the last year or so.
Exactly. And our poor high schoolers, they're at a deficit to communicate anyway with an adult. You know, that's a tough thing when you don't know, do I talk to them like my parents? Do I talk to them like, how do I talk to them to a boss? And then you throw someone in who's angry and, you know, it's just an ugly situation. So.
Well, and how to have difficult conversations. You know, I was talking to my daughter and she's making minimum wage in a time where nobody's making minimum wage. And I said, you need to talk to them about, you know, how to increase your pay and what the plan is for that. And I mean, just the look of abject fear on her face was like, there's no way you know, so how to advocate for yourself, you know, that worker voice tool. You know, I know our kids are missing that. And, you know, most adults probably, you know, don't talk to, you know, I hear of a lot of people leaving a job over something that is just so extremely fixable. And it's like when you're in a business and you learn that you lost a customer and you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have just known you had that problem, it's such an easy solution.
Yeah. You know, Susan Herrig, now I know, like, I'm going to step back a minute and I should have done quick introductions, but I feel like we've been, right, all had some different meetings with different folks, but not everybody, right, has been together. So I just want to point out, and Anne Marie, thanks for pointing out Dave Levine, who is on the Roaring Fork Leadership Board of Directors, but also doing some programming and facilitating some programs for CMC. And Erin Barr was part of our conversations when we talked about employers. And she comes from the Gantt, and then Sarah Torrey works for RFL. But Susan Herrig is an HR of engagement and development at SKICO. And I'm just curious in the probably listening that you've had so far, kind of that perspective of HR, especially when we were talking about like those HR type of offerings, right? And of course, you're in a larger company that can potentially do onboarding on a fairly regular basis. So Susan, any ideas or inputs?
Well, in many ways, it's edifying to hear that I'm not alone in my pain, that all of you are feeling that as well in varying degrees, even though we are the quote largest employer. The challenges we face going from 1,000 employees to 4,000 in 6 weeks. And then being spread out over 4 mountains, 4 hotels, and 300 buildings has made things really logistically challenging. And so those are everything that you're identifying are topics that we are looking to build internally and or lean into agencies like Roaring Fork Leadership. I'm on the board and I was purposeful in that. So I can say, what are you doing that I can take back to my organization? And this is the step. It's really edifying. Another reason why I'm encouraged by our mutual pain is that this is the direction that Roaring Fork Leadership is going. We've recently completed a survey, and what you were saying is what the other community members are saying is we need to be more agile and we need to have greater opportunities to provide leadership training, fundamental skills for supervisors, transition skills for people who are thinking about, perhaps in my business, their bodies can no longer physically support the work that they do as ski instructors or ski patrollers. They're professional athletes, and professional athletes weren't necessarily meant to work for 40 years. So there's so many dynamics in play in our valley, and I think the solution is very nicely captured in this report that Andrea and team worked on to provide more meaningful and agile learning for those small businesses as well as the larger businesses that meet the employee and the employer where they're at. So Andrea, is that where
Yeah,
what
thank
were
you.
looking for? And
In a side conversation I had with Susan, that when she looked at the report for the first time, it was like a little bit of a surprise that diversity, equity, inclusion wasn't kind of a topic that came up on a stronger voice, didn't raise that need for organizations. And again, just, it could have been the way, Deb or I framed questions along the way that didn't come up, but I think we're seeing more and more of that, and maybe in small and large organizations, is that importance of DEI or JEDI or whatever.
But Andrea,
That absolutely.
think about, oops, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I think that absolutely should be a component of any supervisory or HR training. Just the value of putting a focus on DEI.
Yep.
And all I was going to say, Christina, was that a lot of those ethical leadership type of modules that we could create and offer wouldn't be included. That topic would be included and be a foundational concept and skill set that I think we could help provide for people.
Yeah.
Even
That
though
would
it
be
didn't
great.
come up specifically, I think it may have been there underneath. I don't know.
Well, I think I was struck, I was reading some really prolific, and important communication or headline, probably from People magazine or something, but they were talking about how Lizzo, the performer, recently changed the lyrics of her song because she used the word spaz. And that does a disservice to those with disabilities. And it was a blind spot for me. And the point in that is we all have so many blind spots. And if we are creating a culture that our employees want to stay in, because the odds are stacked against us in this valley. I mean, we've acknowledged the housing and the childcare, but man, it's really hard to live here. Even if prices were to go down 30% in housing, it is still largely unaffordable. The short-term rentals, there's so many headwinds that our workforce is facing. And so anything that we can do to make this a community-wide place where people feel valued, where they feel respected, where they feel like they belong, can help in that fight against the wages, the housing, and everything else that we all face and experience on a daily basis.
And Susan, you just hit the 3 pillars of this whole thing: value, respect, and belonging. If people don't feel those 3 things, they're out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those are essential components to any of these trainings that we come up with.
Yeah, I think all of the components of a quality job are something that businesses need to understand, that, wages are a component. They're not necessarily the biggest component or the most important component. And so if you are a smaller business, particularly with, frontline business, typically low paid positions, there are other things that you can do to retain and attract a really great workforce.
I love that you say that, because I think it's really easy, and I know I can fall into this trap where it's so easy to sigh and put back a palm to forehead and bemoan the challenges of the housing and so forth. But in many ways that lets us off the hook, because those are things that individually I can't control. But what I can control is the quality of leadership development, the thoughtfulness behind the culture that my company is building. Those are things that I can control. And so if we can continue to provide the resources for things that are within our small businesses control, I think we'll be better off for it.
Thank you, Susan. That was a really excellent comment. I'm so glad to hear that, because we've got examples of businesses in rural resort areas with a really high cost of living, with not great transportation, with no childcare, that aren't necessarily aren't the industry jobs. They're small businesses, and they're not having problems with talent attraction, retention. I mean, it exists. So thank you. That was an interesting.
And it goes back to what someone said before. People quit because of the people, not because of the job, right? And if they're not feeling that respect, that support and that belonging and representation and trust, I mean, all of these foundational things, if they're not feeling those things, they're out. But those are things that we can fix, or not fix, but we can help improve.
I keep wanting to do a training that's called "It's Not Them, It's You," marketed to businesses.
Great title.
Well, and Deb, when you were talking about, I had to write these down as value, respect, and belonging. Many years ago, when I was a youngster, I was living in Steamboat, and I was a lifty a seasonal lifty first year, and I did not feel like I belonged. We were making lifty wages, living in a commune basically to make it work. But I desperately wanted to stay and live that lifestyle. And if businesses can see the potential of people who say, I want to live, I know it's hard, help me, believe in me, keep me, and let me grow with you, I think we can grow our own and keep our own. And so that, again, is on the onus of the employer to support and build their people. Because I got to say, some of those people that I've talked to, job seekers, they just feel really badly about the situation, themselves, and their ability to move up. And so if we can recognize that, build that workforce and keep them with all these different skills, I think we're doing a number of good things to strengthen the Valley, strengthen our communities, and strengthen our workforce.
And quickly, Carolyn, to add to that, I think what a comment was mentioned earlier, like how the employee advocates for them. You got to speak up, right? And they say, I want to make this work, but I'm struggling, whatever that conversation is. And the employer, of course, supporting that, helping conversations around, let's find some of those resources, or let's, what can my organization, what's in, like Susan, what's within our control and how I build the culture here to support you, right? Feeling.
Yeah. And even just having a conversation with an employer that says, okay, I'm a lifty. Susan, how do I climb up the ladder? I want to be a long-term ski co person. I have bad knees, so I really don't want to be on the hill. How do I, what are my options? And so advocating and building your own career path in concert with your supervisor, I think we need to arm our employees with that type of knowledge and strategy.
Yeah. Erin, can I pick, sorry, go ahead, Anne Marie, and then I'd love to hear it from Erin at the Gantt.
Okay, sure. So I completely agree, Carolyn. And sometimes I think also, like in my perspective, when I'm doing classes, I need to go to my customer, or we need to go to the employees and see what do they need? What are they looking for? Because you know what, we could build a super cool, amazing training path for them, but if they're not invested, it doesn't matter. So we need to really meet them in the middle and talk to them. Because exactly, Carolyn, what if they're a lifty and they don't want to go anywhere? But if they are and they really want to climb, then we need to match up with them and see where they're going to, because it's a very different workforce. The kids, they have a very different view on a lot of things, and they want to be happy. They want to be included. They want all of this. So, you see these companies that are doing it and thriving. It's amazing what the community you can build. But I really think we have to take a tiny step back and really look at them and what do they need and what are they looking for before we build something, because you can build the greatest class in the world, but if that's not what they're doing or that's not what they're interested, it goes by the wayside. Deb and I know that way too well.
It's not like if you build it, they will come. Well, you can build
Yeah.
anything, but they're not coming.
Yeah, unless it's something they're interested in
Yeah.
and it's gonna benefit them, which I get.
So Christina, hang on a second. Erin, again, just any comments on any of the conversations, agreeing? Is there something that we're missing that we're not putting into our discussion today?
No, I've just kind of been reflecting because we've sort of been having some of these conversations at work a lot lately. I 100% agree with what everyone's saying as far as you quit a job because of your manager, and you stay with a job because of your manager, and all of that is great. And one of the things we talked about in our first conversation was, how do we communicate what the value of the benefits we are giving to people is, not just how much they're getting paid. But I can tell you, in the past month, it's like we feel that we are giving our employees so many benefits, and all they care about at the end of the day is what they're getting paid. And we keep having this conversation with more than one employee. You know what? So-and-so is going to pay me $2 more an hour. I'm leaving. And I'm quitting for $1 more an hour, or whatever that is, even though we know we have a better benefit package or more training opportunities or whatever those things are. So I think it's really lovely in theory, but I don't necessarily think that's the reality right now. And maybe it is just the market when you're talking about housing being so expensive. The cost of living is so expensive, childcare, whatever it is. $1 an hour might make or break it for somebody.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Again, so it's complex, right? It's
Yeah.
complex. Christina?
My other thought about something that employers I don't think really understand is how to build pathways in their business. I talk to a lot of people that, somebody wants some career advancement, but we don't have that, you're this level, or you're a manager, or you're this. But there's a lot of levels in between there, and a lot of different skill sets that people can achieve within that. And I don't think employers see that opportunity, to create this pathway that, you're not just a server, you can work up into these other skill sets that will be hopefully attached to more money. But if not, can position you for a different job.
That's a great point. And I think a lot of that is just ensuring there's that two-way communication between the employee and the employer, so that the employee can voice, here's where I'd like to go. But the employer is also asking those questions. How are things going? Where do you see yourself? What's next? Do you feel challenged, not challenged? All of those sorts of things. But that's a great question. Or, I'm almost thinking like there could be some, these probably exist, but you got to go dig around on the internet to find like an onboarding guide. And then does that fit our resort area, right? Per se, or the industry you're in? You might get one or two nuggets out of those type of things. But again, anyway, just gets me thinking of what are these rural mountain, right, resources that potentially have 10 nuggets, not just one, right, that you get out of something that's out there. For the sake of time, it's 2:41. I have one thing I wanted to share. I have been playing with a prototype that can give you a look at what might be the possibility. And this is a web page that I started creating. As you mentioned, one of the short-term goals is what might be a hub that features programming that is being offered of these skill sets. So this, of course, is like a slider that would have logos of partnering organizations, for example, and then a little ditty about what you're stumbling upon. Oh, look, Dave Levine. Who knew? Anyway, he's doing a class with CMC. So it was just like an easy one for me to kind of mess around with to create this prototype page. So the idea would be, here's a class, you can click on learn more, and then you get more of the details. And of course, here's his flyer. You could put a register now. It's easy enough to put a link or a button in there. and these can be, again, this is just simple. I was just plugging and playing, but then as you scroll down, here's all the other offerings. COVENTURE's accelerator program. There's navigating uncertainty. Again, I have to fix logos and little things like that. But again, that's minor at the scope of this. I mean, this could be built out and then potentially building in some searchability by organization or by topic. So there's some really cool potential for the build out of what we're talking about. And like what I was mentioning is that collaboration. Maybe there's like how we get information and upload it. I understand there's like admin and all sorts of stuff. And that's where potentially there's some funding or collaboration that can occur so that this becomes successful. And once it's built out, you know, again, and it's going to be a constant building out, but it's, you know, more eyes that are on it to help support adding content, helping put content, whatever that looks like would be really helpful, because otherwise it would go to waste at the end of the day, or it's not being used. So those would be the type of things. So just wanted to share this little prototype.
Andrea, would there be an opportunity just to help maintain this for people to submit their own events? I mean, it's really hard to get people to do that, but like you said, compiling all these events, we try to do it. It's super challenging.
It is, and I'm very familiar with that barrier. I think if we had a form, let's just say, you know what I mean, fill up this information, upload, write a PDF or a whatever you can, a headshot, that would help, right? And then of course it's the plug and play, because you, as you know, like this is a WordPress website, so the idea is you don't want to give everybody admin access to do those sorts of things. So there's some ways to streamline some of that process for sure. So again, just dabbling with, you know, like it's like piloting. Let's test the waters. We don't have to say we're going to commit to everything, because you know, and hence why this conversation today is like, what are some of those low-hanging fruits beyond like communication? And I like the onboarding series, I think is another great building upon topic, or the manager supervisor, that middle level. You start managing people, now what, right? So that's kind of what I'm hearing might be some build out. And then I would also say we should always, I would hope we could always coordinate and collaborate. Who's doing what? Hey, or you know, here's a need, like we could all come together and say, here's a need. Now who's best to put it on? Who has the capability, the resources, the instructors, and you know, all of those sort of things. And because we don't want to, I don't want to step on feet. I don't want to do double duty. You know, let's serve our communities to the best way we possibly can.
And if I could just, you know, make a suggestion when we talk about classes and things of that nature, half days or full days, you know, short, sweet, 6-hour intensives, not 14-week where you go every Tuesday night. It's got to be those short workshop ideas to work with the workforce. So
I agree. We even in the survey RFL did, it was like 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're hearing.
That's coming through loud and clear. We received that feedback from the employees and the employee group too.
Yep. Well, that's our time. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time and just thank you all so much for the input. I'm again, more to come. I mean, this isn't done. I'm hoping to continue collaborations. Everybody hopefully has Deb or Mai's contact information to keep this alive. And if and when that let's say a hub of programming listings comes open again, I might need information to help plug some things in, or keep your eye on it to make sure we're doing a good job. Those sort of things to see what comes. So again, just thank you everyone. And I'm happy to stay if there's any additional questions, but just want to respect again your time and thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate being included. This is important work.
It is.
I would agree, long time in coming, and I think it's a really tremendous opportunity for the entire region. So happy to help informally, formally, whatever, to keep this ball rolling.
Yeah, thank you so much. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you all for coming and for helping us keep the ball rolling.
Yeah. Great.
Definitely. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Good
you.
work.
Thanks.